I mean, it feels sort of like worship when we're just able to. I was looking out and watching everybody interact and be together in this beautiful space, and I hate to call people back. So, the gospel reading today is from the Gospel of Matthew, but I'm going to start us off with a little reading from the book of Sirach, which is part of the Apocrypha. In the Christian Protestant tradition, we put this book in the Apocrypha, which is a little collection of books where have such wisdom, and they're ancient, and we don't really deal with them too much. They don't really pop up in our which is unfortunate. They don't come up in our lectionary too much, but but they're very important. In the Roman Catholic tradition, they're actually, in Greek Orthodox tradition, they would be part of the canon. And in the Hebrew and Jewish tradition, they are part of the Septuagint. But there's lots of reasons for why we stick them in the Apocrypha. But anyway, Sirach, I want to share this with you before you hear the gospel. I'll invite you to just see if you can't, as you listen to the gospel, hear the reflection and the connection to the book of Sirach. Sirach is written probably, it's dated as early as, parts of it are dated as early as 1st century BC. It's very ancient. So this would have been one of the ancient texts that it not would have been, it also still is, one of the ancient texts that was looked to and used as a guidance and with it's a wisdom teaching. And in the Jewish tradition, in the time of Jesus would have, this is one of the texts that would have been part of the foundational teachings that they would have looked to for teaching and guidance. So this is chapter 6, verses 24 through 28. Now I'm going to start at verse 23 through 28. Listen, my child, and accept my judgment. Do not reject my counsel. Put your feet into her fetters, and your neck into her collar. Bend your shoulders and carry her, and do not fret under her bonds. Come to her with all your soul, and keep her ways with all your might. Search out and seek, and she will become known to you. And when you get hold of her, do not let her go. For at last you will find the rest she gives, and she will be changed into joy for you. Isn't that beautiful? She will be changed into joy for you. She, of course, is wisdom in this context. Lest you think it has something to do with how we treat each other in bondage. It's wisdom. So now we'll turn to the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 11, today's reading from the lectionary. And the wind just blew my marker, so give me a moment. Chapter 11, starting at verse 16. This, the verse that gets cut out of this lectionary reading is the verses 1 through 15 get kind of chopped out here. And it's important to know that Jesus is talking just prior to this. He's talking about John the Baptist. He's kind of raising him up and names John the Baptist is a great prophet, and was not well received, really, always. So then he goes on to say, but to what will I compare this generation? It is like children sitting in the marketplaces and calling to one another. We played the flute for you, and you did not dance. We wailed, and you did not mourn. For John came, neither eating nor drinking, and they say, he has a demon. The Son of Man came eating and drinking, and they say, look, a glutton and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners. Yet wisdom is vindicated by her deeds. May the hearing of these words, actually, I'm going to go on. I want you to hear something else. Come to me, all you that are weary and are carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light. Now may the hearing of these words add insight and blessing. My yoke is easy, and my burden is light. Can you see that parallel in Sirach where it says, and I will turn it to joy, will bring you joy? In a nutshell, let me just spoil it. Here's a spoiler alert. This is, in a nutshell, the gospel writer of Matthew has put these words in Jesus is saying, I am the embodiment of wisdom. We've always known and recognized wisdom as something separate, like but in this moment, Jesus is claiming, and Jesus becomes the embodiment of wisdom too. So what does that mean for us? What does that mean? We know, here's the thing, here's what we know. We know that when Jesus says, my yoke is light, this is so, I want you to really think about this. We know what happens to Jesus, right? Everybody here familiar? We know the story, right? We know what happens to Jesus. We know that he is persecuted. We know that he bears the brunt of the empire's oppression, and all of the ugliness is played out with him, right? He bears this brunt of it. He is persecuted, he is hauled off to jail, he is tortured, he is treated with he is crucified, he is killed in the most brutal form the empire has available to him. And it is humiliating. It's designed to be humiliating. It's designed to be hateful. It's designed to cause pain, not only to the person who's being crucified, but to any who follow or love them. I mean, it is brutal. It is mass destruction, first century style. That's what happens to Jesus. We also know what happens to him, right? We also know that's not the end of the story, because we know that in 3 days Jesus rises from the dead, right? The tomb is empty. We know that, and it's beautiful to know that. What do we do with this little section where he's talking about, this puzzling thing about calling us children? Because that's exactly what he's doing. He's calling us children. Like we're like children. That's not a compliment in this text. What he's saying is, you guys act like children. You act like you have no knowledge of anything. Like you're just, like, on one hand, you sit in this marketplace, you sit in this gathering, and you point fingers at each other. And one group is saying, we played music, we did this beautiful thing, and you didn't even dance. And the others are saying, we were wailing in pain, and you didn't even cry or mourn. You don't even have any sense. You're just fighting, pointing fingers. Can you feel that? Can you feel that tension? Can you see where it happens in our world today, how we divide ourselves up into this? We start pointing fingers. You should be better. You didn't do this. You acted like this. You didn't notice this. You should be better. I have a right to be angry or to condemn you because you should have. This is the world. This is the way we tend to live in this society nowadays. You should have. And if you're not careful when you read this text, you might just think that it supports that a little bit. I mean, right? You might just think that, well, if I yoke myself to Jesus, then I am righteous and I can sort of then start looking out at others. I'm carrying the it's all, I hear this all the time. People say, they'll use this text and they'll say, well, yeah, all you got to do is follow Jesus, which is true. I feel like such a rock star. I get to mess with my mic. Sorry. But what does it really mean? What does it really mean? That's what I want to know. What does it really mean? Jesus, of all people, Jesus says, my burden is light. I mean, when I look at the story, I think it doesn't sound light at all. It sounds pretty hard and heavy, right? To walk the way that he walked, to come to this world and to live and to walk as he had to walk and to be treated as he was treated. Like, it doesn't sound pleasing and easy. And yet the invitation is there. Come to me. Come to me. You are tired and weary. Come to me. You're carrying heavy loads and life is hard. Come to me. Because my yoke is light. My yoke is light. We will carry this burden together. I think, does Jesus mean that my burden in the wholeness of creation, in the mystery of life, and in God's realm, all the burdens that I carry, all the things that wear me down, is it just light and easy for God to carry that? Does that make me feel better? I think so. I think so. But still, we have to get to what it means. Lately, I've had a lot of conversations with colleagues, friends, and mentors around the concept of sin. It just keeps coming up a lot. People are really concerned about sin. Like, I don't know, is it just me? It might just be me in my role and capacity, but there's a lot of concern around sin. Like, what is a sin, and how do we deal with sin and sinners? I've been asked this a lot lately. I'm glad if you haven't, but I have. And it's really troubling to me. And I think, I've had somebody even say to me, well, you don't even, you've got theology light. You don't even have a theology of sin. You got to have a theology of sin. You got to know what to do with the sinners. I mean, it's great to talk about the table, which, by the way, isn't this beautiful text? Because just as a little side note, it's pointed out that Jesus is eating with the tax cut. He's gluttonous. That's what he's accused of. He's gluttony, drunkard, completely different from John the Baptist, who is a prophet, who lives a much more severe, what we would austere lifestyle, right? He's fasting and bugs, eating all that, very, just dressing John the Baptist. And then there's Jesus, who's like eating too much, drinking too much, not only drinking and eating too much, but with the tax collectors and sinners. I mean, what better affirmation of the open table do you want? That's a theology of the open table, that, yeah, everybody gets to come. We're going to eat with anybody. Woo. I feel like we should yell amen. Like, we're going to eat and drink with everybody. And it's a table of abundance. I mean, that's this one little line. It's abundance. Jesus is operating in a time, in a century, in the first century, when there was not enough for everybody. I mean, there was more than enough for the 1%, the very top landowners and the power, but everybody else was hustling and trying. Like, there wasn't enough. You weren't ever really quite sure where things were coming from. There was a scarcity. healing. Here's Jesus eating and drinking with everybody. He didn't exclude anybody. Abundance. He's living as if you didn't have to worry about all that stuff. I don't know why you think you need a theology of sin. To me, that's the good news. Your theology of sin, if we want to talk about sin, talk about yourself. That's what Jesus is saying. It's not about pointing fingers. It's not about sitting in the marketplace and pointing and saying, you did, you got to be punished. This is what's going to happen. It's about what are you? What's happening inside of you? What's your burden? What do you need to change? What do you need for yourself? What do you need? How can you yoke to Jesus' light yoke and have your burdens lightened? What's separating you? Because nothing separates you from the love of God. There is nothing. God is never away from you or anybody. And listen, that means anybody. That means even the people you don't like. It's a good reminder. Now, I've also heard a lot of talk this week and all of the pain and the brokenness and the hurt and the sorrow we've had around Gwinwood. And this heard a lot of people say things like, "Oh, I just hope whoever did this, if somebody did this, I hope they get it." You know, that's easy to go there, right? It's easy to think, oh. But that's not the yoke that we're supposed to be bearing when we put on the yoke as disciples, when we claim the wisdom of Christ, when we claim that, when we sit back and listen and watch and understand what we should not be doing is wishing ill will on somebody else. Because when you do that, when we turn to that, when we give in, because in the language of Jesus, in the empire, the time of empire, right? That's what keeps it going. Oppression, hatred, anger, all these things, all these divisions will never go away when we perpetuate it ourselves. You have to, if you will follow in the way, when you listen to Jesus, when he says, "Come to me, all of you who are burdened, heavy heart, all who are weary, when you come to me, I'm going to carry the burden with you, not for you, with you. I'm going to lighten it a little bit for you, but you've got to let go of the way of the empire, which is to respond in kind, which is to wish harm. When you feel yourself going there, you have to pull it back. Take a look inside. What's hurting and broken? What hurts? Where's the pain within you? And let that be resolved. It's the only way. In this beautiful place, in this beautiful world, with all of its beautiful brokenness and all of the pain and all of the ugliness that happens around us too, all of the, don't give in to it. Don't give in to it. Don't point your fingers and talk about what's not enough in somebody else. Receive the abundance of all that is good in the love of God, who holds us and who claims, even in the midst of the brokenness, that there is plenty, there is an abundance, and love is truly the answer and the way. Then you will feel the joy. Then your burden will be turned to joy if you like to read Sirach, or your burden will be light if you like to Which yoke will you? You get a choice. That's what it comes down to, people. You have a choice. That's part of the beauty. You get to choose. What will you choose? Which yoke will you choose? Put down your finger and claim love? Or will you carry the heavy weight of this world?